Volume 3, Chapter 8 of The Last Man. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephanie Dupaul de Martin. The Last Man by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Volume 3, Chapter 8. We had now reached Switzerland, so long the final mark and aim of our exertions. We had looked, I know not wherefore, with hope and pleasing expectation, on her congregation of hills and snowy crags, and opened our bosoms with renewed spirits to the icy biz, which even at midsummer used to come from the northern glacier laden with cold. Yet how could we nourish expectation of relief? Like her native England, and the vast extent of fertile France, this mountain-embowered land was desolate of its inhabitants. Nor bleak mountain top, nor snow-nourished rivulet, not the ice-laden biz, nor thunder, the tamer of contagion, had preserved them. Why therefore should we claim exemption? Who was there indeed to save? What troop had we brought fit to stand at bay, and combat with the conqueror? We were a failing remnant, tamed to mere submission to the coming blow. A train half dead, through fear of death, a hopeless, unresisting, almost reckless crew, which, in the tossed bark of life, had given up all pilotage, and resigned themselves to the destructive force of ungoverned winds. Like a few furrows of unreaped corn, which, left standing on a wide field after the rest is gathered to the garner, are swiftly borne down by the winter storm. Like a few straggling swallows, which, remaining after their fellows had, on the first unkind breath of passing autumn, migrated to genial climes, were struck to earth by the first frost of November. Like a stray sheep that wanders over the sleet-beaten hillside, while the flock is in the pen, and dies before morning dawn. Like a cloud, like one of many, that were spread in impenetrable woof over the sky, which, when the shepherd north has driven its companions to drink Antipodean noon, fades and dissolves in the clear ether, such were we. We left the fair margin of the beauteous lake of Geneva, and entered the Alpine ravines, tracing to its source the brawling Arve, through the rock-bound valley of Servox, besides the mighty waterfalls, and under the shadow of the inaccessible mountains, we travelled on, while the luxuriant walnut-tree gave place to the dark pine, whose musical branches swung in the wind, and whose upright forms had braved 1,000 storms, till the verdant sod, the flowery dell, and shrubbery hill were exchanged for the sky-piercing, untrodden, seedless rock, the bones of the world waiting to be clothed with everything necessary to give life and beauty. Strange that we should seek shelter here. Surely if, in those countries where earth was wont, like a tender mother, to nourish her children, we had found her a destroyer, we need not seek it here, where stricken by keen penury she seemed to shudder through her stony veins. Nor were we mistaken in our conjecture. We vainly sought the vast and ever-moving glaciers of Chamonix, rifts of pendant ice, seas of congelated waters, the leafless groves of tempest-battered pines, dells, mere paths for the loud avalanche, and hilltops, the resort of thunderstorms. Pestilence reigned paramount even here. By the time that day and night, like twin sisters of equal growth, shared equally their dominion over the hours, one by one, beneath the ice caves, beside the waters springing from the thawed snows of 1,000 winters, another and yet another of the remnant of the race of man closed their eyes for ever to the light. Yet we were not quite wrong in seeking a scene like this, whereon to close the drama. Nature, true to the last, consoled us in the very heart of misery. Sublime grandeur of outward objects soothed our hapless hearts, and were in harmony with our desolation. Many sorrows have befallen man during his checkered course, and many a woe-stricken mourner had found himself sole survivor among many. Our misery took its majestic shape and colouring from the vast ruin that accompanied and made one with it. Thus on lovely earth many a dark ravine contains a brawling stream, shadowed by romantic rocks, threaded by mossy paths. But all except this wanted the mighty background, the towering Alps, whose snowy capes or bared ridges lifted us from our dull mortal abode to the palaces of nature's own. This solemn harmony of event and situation regulated our feelings, and gave as it were a fitting costume to the last act. Majestic gloom and tragic pomp attended the decease of wretched humanity. The funeral procession of monarchs of old was transcended by our splendid shoes. Near the sources of the Arveiron we performed the rites four only excepted, the last of the species. Adrian and I, leaving Clara and Evelyn wrapped in peaceful, unobserving slumber, carried the body to this desolate spot, and placed it in those caves of ice beneath the glacier, which rive and split with the slightest sound, and bring destruction on those within the clefts. No bird or beast of prey could here profane the frozen form. So with hushed steps and in silence we placed the dead on a bier of ice, and then, departing, stood on the rocky platform beside the river springs. All hushed as we had been, the very striking of the air with our persons had sufficed to disturb the repose of this thawless region. And we had hardly left the cavern before vast blocks of ice, detaching themselves from the roof, fell and covered the human image we had deposited within. We had chosen a fair moonlight night, but our journey thither had been long, and the crescent sank behind the western heights by the time we had accomplished our purpose. The snowy mountains and blue glaciers shone in their own light. The rugged and abrupt ravine, which formed one side of Mont Anvers, was opposite to us, the glacier at our side. At our feet Arveiron, white and foaming, dashed over the pointed rocks that jutted into it, and with whirring spray and ceaseless roar disturbed the stilly night. Yellow lightnings played around the vast dome of Mont Blanc, silent as the snow-clad rock they illuminated. All was bare, wild, and sublime, while the singing of the pines and melodious murmurings added a gentle interest to the rough magnificence. Now the riving and fall of icy rocks clave the air, now the thunder of the avalanche burst on our ears. In countries whose features are of less magnitude, nature betrays her living powers in the foliage of the trees, in the growth of herbage, in the soft purling of meandering streams. Here, endowed with giant attributes, the torrent, the thunderstorm, and the flow of massive waters display her activity. Such the churchyard, such the requiem, such the eternal congregation that waited on our companion's funeral. Nor was it the human form alone which we had placed in this eternal sepulchre, whose obsequies we now celebrated. With this last victim, plague vanished from the earth. Death had never wanted weapons wherewith to destroy life, and we, few and weak as we had become, were still exposed to every other shaft with which his full quiver teemed. But pestilence was absent from among them. For 7 years it had had full sway upon earth. She had trod every nook of our spacious globe. She had mingled with the atmosphere, which as a cloak enwraps all our fellow creatures. The inhabitants of native Europe, the luxurious Asiatic, the swarthy African, and free American had been vanquished and destroyed by her. Her barbarous tyranny came to its close here in the rocky vale of Chamonix. Still recurring scenes of misery and pain, the fruits of this distemper, made no more a part of our lives. The word plague no longer rung in our ears. The aspect of plague, incarnate in the human countenance, no longer appeared before our eyes. From this moment I saw plague no more. She abdicated her throne, and despoiled herself of her imperial sceptre among the ice rocks that surrounded us. She left solitude and silence co-heirs of her kingdom. My present feelings are so mingled with the past that I cannot say whether the knowledge of this change visited us, as we stood on this sterile spot. It seemed to me that it did, that a cloud seemed to pass from over us, that a weight was taken from the air, that henceforth we breathed more freely, and raised our heads with some portion of former liberty. Yet we did not hope. We were impressed by the sentiment that our race was run, but that plague would not be our destroyer. The coming time was as a mighty river, down which a charmed boat is driven, whose mortal steersman knows that the obvious peril is not the one he needs fear, yet that danger is nigh, and who floats, awestruck under beetling precipices, through the dark and turbid waters, seeing in the distance yet stranger and ruder shapes, towards which he is irresistibly impelled. What would become of us? Oh, for some Delphic oracle or Pythian maid to utter the secrets of futurity, or for some Oedipus to solve the riddle of the cruel Sphinx! Such Oedipus was I to be, not divining a word's juggle, but whose agonizing pangs and sorrow-tainted life were to be the engines wherewith to lay bare the secrets of destiny, and